Hello and welcome to Cybrary's Microsoft Azure Administrator AZ-103 course. I'm your instructor, Will Carlson, and this is episode 1, the course overview. First, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I've been in IT for over 15 years in various different roles, all the way from help desk to network administrator, systems administrator, and on into cybersecurity, and ultimately into the role that I hold today for a mid-sized financial services company as their director of IT and cybersecurity. Around the office, they joke that if it plugs into the wall, it's Will's problem. I hold a number of certifications that are relevant for this course and some cybersecurity certifications as well. And an interesting fact about me is that I only have one kidney. If you want to hear more about that story, please reach out and connect with me on the Cybrary community or on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect and talk with you about that story in particular, about this course, about your experience on Cybrary. This really is a great platform. Please connect with me here. I'd look forward to it. Now, the prerequisites for this course. There are two perspectives, in my opinion, on the prerequisites for this course. Microsoft's perspective and my perspective. Now, Microsoft clearly gets a vote. This is their course and their exam. And they say this is a course and an exam for somebody that's in Azure as an administrator already. So somebody with hands-on regular experience with Azure as it is. Now, absolutely, those skills will definitely be helpful. There will be less new information for you to take on in this course. Being an Azure administrator on the day-to-day already will definitely not hurt you for the AZ-103 exam. But strictly speaking, I don't think that it's necessary. I think if you have strong systems administration's background, you're familiar with networking, so subnets and CIDR notation don't scare you off, network ports and firewall rules are not foreign to you, I think you'll be just fine with this course. The other caveat I would give is it's good to be familiar with some cloud computing terms such as infrastructure or platform as a service, software as a service, and some general cloud security concerns, and networking will definitely help you out in this course. Now, if you don't tick all of those boxes perfectly, don't panic. You have a couple of options, I think. The first option would be to take some serious notes in the course as you go and do a little self-evaluation. If you didn't understand a concept, and especially if it's because of some foundational knowledge gaps, pause the course, do your own research, and fill in the gaps. This course will help you, I think, immensely with AZ-103, but there's going to be a significant component of passing the exam that requires you to do some research and reading of documentation on your own. So definitely do the same for the fundamental concepts. So if CIDR notation throws you off when we're in the networking section, stop what you're doing and do a little bit of reading. You'll be just fine. The other alternative here, if you're finding yourself a little flat on the Azure knowledge, would be to go and do the AZ-900 course and or sit for that certification exam as well. I highly recommend it. Just know that AZ-900 is not a technical exam. It's going to give you a high-level overview of the Azure ecosystem and of cloud computing environments in general. But I think those are your two options. If you have weaknesses, admit them and fill in those gaps. You'll be just fine for AZ-103. Now, the skills that we're going to cover in this course and ultimately that the exam measure, we're going to follow pretty closely to that exam outline. The first one's going to be some management and administrative tasks required in Azure, so using some resource groups and subscriptions and management groups and kind of the way that Azure is architected in general. We're going to talk about storage. Clearly you need storage to have a cloud environment. We're going to talk about virtual machines and networking, all key components to doing anything meaningful in the cloud. And then lastly, we're going to cover, somewhat unique to Microsoft, I believe, is the concept of identity. Clearly, there's identity management in a number of places, but identity management really is key to the Azure ecosystem because of the integration and how closely it's related to Azure Active Directory. We'll talk about that more as we go throughout the course. Now, about the exam itself, obviously, I have two goals here for this course. The first one would be to adequately help you prepare for passing the AZ-103 exam. The second would be to grow your Azure administration skills so that they're practically applicable in your day-to-day life. Now, about the exam specifically is if you've not sat for a Microsoft exam before, they tend to be relatively narrow and they expect you to know the material fairly deeply. Now, we will call out the areas of Azure that you need to know, and you will need to know them with sufficient depth. Microsoft is really good about testing that, and they do that through a number of ways with their exams. To that point, you'll need to know how to do something, but also why would you do it at all? There are going to be some case study type questions on the exam that give you the information, ask you what you should do, and then want you to implement it as you go. So definitely know the how and the why. You're also going to need to be able to identify commands for command line tools. In fact, I hate to tell you, for AZ-103, you're going to have to know 2 different command line tools. We'll talk more about that in upcoming videos. Don't panic yet, bear with me. But you will need to be able to identify commands. Don't expect you'll have to write commands from scratch on AZ-103, but you'll definitely need to do some matching fill in the blank or drag and drop when it comes to scripting commands and test questions. Microsoft is also very good about asking multiple question modalities. So drag and drop questions, fill in the blank questions, case study based questions, multiple drop down blanks on one question. So if you've not taken a Microsoft exam before, I really recommend you looking into the approved official test bank for the AZ-103 exam. That's offered by a company called MeasureUp. It's going to cost a little bit of money. It's about $135 last time I checked, and that only gives you 30 days access to the test engine. That is a little bit of money, but I find it's a highly valuable investment, especially if you haven't sat for a Microsoft exam before. Knowing how the questions are going to be thrown at you sometimes is equally as important as knowing the material itself. Now, this course will have a series of slides and live demos, and quite frankly, this course is going to be almost exclusively live demo. We are going to spend a lot of time in the Azure portal itself. Something else I want to call your attention to are going to be the quiz questions for this course. Now, if you've sat through Cybrary courses before, you're probably used to a couple of questions at the end of every video segment. I'm going to do it a little bit differently for this course, partially because Cybrary is launching a relatively new quiz tool, and also because I find it really beneficial to test takers and learners to have all of the questions available to them in one spot. And I think the advantage that gives you is being able to use those questions to see how ready you really are for the exam. So if you want to hold off on doing all the questions until the end of the course, you're welcome to do that. As an alternative, if you like the couple of questions at the end of every video, we're going to break out the questions as they relate to each video segment, so you can go through and say, give me the questions for episode 1. So you have a couple of options of how you do the quiz questions, but to get to them, you'll find them in the resources below and by searching the Cybrary platform for those questions. It's a little bit different, but I think you'll find that it's a really good approach. The last thing I want to mention here about this course format is that we will be using PowerShell exclusively. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that I'll explain in future episodes, but we have option here. Microsoft and Azure let you use Azure CLI, a bash-based tool, or a PowerShell-based tool. And for consistency's sake, we're going to stick with PowerShell. I find that switching between both command line options gets a little bit confusing, but I'm going to recommend that if we're doing work in the portal through the GUI-based tool, you're going to need to know how to do that work with PowerShell and with Azure CLI. You're at least going to need to be familiar with the commands you would use if you had to do that. So coming up next, we're going to dive right in and talk about some of the supplemental materials that are available to help you pass AZ-103. We really are lucky with this exam in particular because there are a whole host of supplemental materials that you can use that are really high quality, and it's good that we can go ahead and actually get our hands in Azure without having to spin up any testing environments or lab environments. This course really is lucky in that respect. I want to thank you for joining me for this course. I'm really looking forward to the upcoming videos. Again, my goal here is to adequately help you prepare for passing the AZ-103 exam and for growing some new skills to use in your day-to-day administrative life in Azure. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm looking forward to the next episode.